Hello and welcome to Newsmax TV. I'm John Bachman. Right now we are talking with the chairman of the Republican National Committee, Reince Priebus. Mr. Chairman, thanks for being with us.
Hey, I'm happy to be on the show.
All right, before we get to the dismal August jobs report, let's talk about President Obama's speech last night. On a scale of 1 to 10, how honest was the president with the American people?
I don't know. 1, I suppose. I mean, the fact of the matter is it was a sort of a fantasy land type rendition of where we're at in this country. This race is going to come down to some fundamental things, which is, are people better off today than they were 4 years ago, and did the president fulfill the mission of his presidency? I mean, I believe that people are forgiving and people are generally filled with a fair amount of grace when it comes to politicians. However, if you can't point to some of your most basic promises and show that the missions have been completed when it comes to foreclosures, health care, jobs, the debt, the deficit, gas prices, if you can't show anything as being improved in those areas, I can't imagine how anybody's going to go into this final closing argument thinking that we need 4 more years of this misery.
Yeah, about those jobs numbers, I want to talk about one in particular. Between 50 and 385,000 Americans gave up looking for work last month. Is this the single most important number in that jobs report? And this really show that pretty much everything the president said on Thursday about his record is irrelevant?
Well, I think what it shows is that the Democrats this week aren't living on Earth. I mean, they're trying to recreate a world that doesn't exist. It shows that of the labor pool, here's another number for you to blow you away. Only 63.5% of people who are eligible to work are actively looking for work. And so that's the lowest number, I think, in decades that we've seen in this country. And then of that number, of the 63.5% of the people that are actually looking for work, 8.1% of those people can't find work. And what you saw this morning was that almost the equivalent of the entire city of Tampa threw up their arms and said, this economy is so bad that I'm not even going to bother looking for work. Chronic unemployment in this country is at a level that we haven't seen since the Great Depression. When a guy walks into an employer's office, or a gal, and they haven't been employed in 6 or 9 months or a year, it may not be fair, but the problem with chronic employment is that when you get that resume and you see that Ted here hasn't been employed for 8 months, it makes employers wonder, well, I wonder what's wrong with Ted. And that's not necessarily always fair, but that's the reality, and that's why this president's record is going to be how this election is going to be decided. And any job, your job, my job, everybody out there, you have goals that you need to meet. And if you can't meet the fundamental goals of your job, well, how do you stay employed?
Yeah, I believe the labor participation rate is the lowest it's been since the fall of 1981. So that's definitely a dismal number. Now, in 2008, President Obama, then Senator Obama, ran on an economic message that resonated with voters. He's again, trying to use many of those same talking points. If Obama and the Democrats say we can't go back to the failed policies of the GOP, how can the president honestly claim that we need to keep using the same policies he's been talking about for the last 4 years?
Well, that's a great point. Exactly. I mean, it's sort of like, the definition of insanity, right? I mean, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. But it's also a good point to take it a step further. President Obama ran in 2008 based on a tough economy. He ran on the economy, he ran against Bush, he ran in the economy, and he said that he would fix the economy that we were in. Now, he promised, it's not like he walked into something and then suddenly something happened and it got really bad and he couldn't have foreseen what was going on. He ran based on his own explanation of competence and ability to fix the situation we were in. And so for him to come back and say, well, things were really bad, well, that's why you won in the first place. You already won on that ground. I mean, you won because of the fact that the economy had to be fixed, and you promised you would do it. So I think that's an important point. It's an obvious point, but it's one that I don't think, talk enough about. And the fact that he didn't fix what he promised he would fix, I think matters. And it matters, and I tell you what, I'm from Wisconsin. I was in Iowa yesterday, and in Ohio. People care about the fact that what we need in politics are people of their word to run for office, and then we need them to govern the way that they've campaigned. That's his biggest problem. He has not governed in the way that he campaigned 4 years ago.
Now, these last few days, we've also heard Democrats put a lot of focus on women's issues, particularly we heard from Sandra Fluke in the women's health issues. We also heard them talk a lot about the Lilly Ledbetter Act, fair pay, equal pay for equal work. Do you really think that Mitt Romney can do better than the Democrats and reach these women voters in a way that he needs to, particularly when it comes to women's health issues?
Well, we're doing better with female voters today than we were in '08, I can tell you that. And one of the reasons is because people, both men and women and everyone in between, as far as Hispanic, Greek, I'm Greek, I'll throw the Greeks in. But every background understands that this economy is not where it needs to be. And women especially understand the household situations out there, and they understand the economic impact of Barack Obama's policies. And I think that on the top line messaging, we're doing much better. Now we need to hone in on, for the next 2 months, to continue pounding away on what the truth is as far as where our economy is, and the propaganda is something different. But we have to do a good job of cutting through the propaganda and talking about the truth.
Karl Rove has just said that Carolyn Kennedy's speech was, in fact, an attack on the Catholic Church for taking a pro-life stance. The Democrats initially didn't want to even include God in their platform, and Michael Reagan has tweeted that the Democrats are becoming, quote-unquote, godless. Do you agree that the Democrats are becoming more godless?
Well, I don't know. Here's what I know, that there is no chance. When we do a platform, and just tell you the way that the procedures work here, I can only speak to that. It's not possible for our platform, through all the edits and all the revisions and all the drafts, for me not to see when things are removed and rewritten. I go through multiple drafts for 2 months before the convention even came upon us. And so when a platform comes on your desk and it has the words, Jerusalem is to be the capital of Israel, and there's a line, a strike through on your line by line with those words stricken out. And when the word God has a line through it, and you see it, and multiple people are in charge of drafting and reviewing, you're darn right it was intentional. There's no way it wasn't intentional. There is no such thing as a technical error of removing Jerusalem and God from your platform. It means to me a couple things. One, I don't think that the Democratic Party today have a fundamental feeling in their gut that Israel is the beacon of freedom in the Middle East. We've seen it with the president and his 1967 border issue, where he threw Israel under the bus there. He threw Benjamin Netanyahu under the bus with no less the Prime Minister of France when the mic was hot, and he didn't know it. And now this. I think at some point, God gave us a brain, and we ought to use it and realize that they're just fundamentally not where we're at. I don't think they're fundamentally where America's at, and I think it's important for us to pound away on that issue.
Do you think they were trying to appeal more to Muslims, or do you think they were trying to appeal more to people who don't believe in any kind of religion whatsoever?
I have no idea. I think that they want to be everything to everybody, and I think you have to stand on principle, and I think standing with Israel and being, I think moral and decent enough to put God in the platform is where this country's at. But most importantly, it's where we're at as people. We know that God has a basis, a fundamental basis in this country, in its founding, in its vision, in its documents, and everything that we are as people. And the fact that the Democrats would be so willing to throw that out, it should tell people a lot about the Democratic Party.
There has also been some growing criticism that Mitt Romney did not specifically thank or mention the U.S. troops on the ground in Afghanistan and Iraq during his acceptance speech. Did you see that speech before it was delivered, and do you agree that that may have been a pretty serious omission?
No, I don't think so at all. I mean, the fact of the matter is that we had multiple tributes to the troops, and we can't thank them enough. The day before, I know Governor Romney was at the VFW. I think it was in Indiana. I think John McCain had quite a tribute on Wednesday night. We did multiple color guard tributes as well. There is just no doubt about it that we owe our freedom to the men and women that have fought in this country and fought for our freedom and the American idea. It couldn't be done enough.
But specifically in Romney's acceptance speech, do you think he really said what the active duty members of the military were hoping to hear from him?
I think so. I mean, I think it's really important for us to talk about how to get our country back on track, how to honor the commitments made by the men and women who have served this country, and how to be responsible with the gifts that God has given us. And I think that Governor Romney did a good job of that on Thursday night.
All right, well, now that both conventions are over, and you were at both, of course, who won the messaging battle, and who made the biggest inroads with undecided voters?
Well, I mean, obviously, I'm the chairman of the Republican Party. You wouldn't expect me to say anything else, but
I expect one answer, but I'd love to get your insight anyway.
I want to tell you why, though. And instead of me telling you who I thought won, I want to tell you why I think we did a better job and ultimately where we are today. Because at the end of the day, this is going to be an election that's decided on facts and how people feel about where they're at in their life today, as opposed to 4 years ago and what they thought they were buying 4 years ago with Barack Obama. And it couldn't be further from where people believed that Barack Obama would deliver this country. The gas, health care, housing, jobs, the debt, the deficit, spending, I mean, you name it. You can rattle everything off, and at some point you have to look at one or two major accomplishments as a president running for re-election to say, I promise you I would do this, and I did it, and because of that, our lives are better. The message from Barack Obama last night is, look, I inherited a tough economy, and things could stink a whole lot worse if it wasn't for me. That's a pretty miserable message to be laying out to the American people, and it's not a message that I think folks are going to buy come November.
Let's talk about media coverage and some of the stuff you just mentioned. Do you think the mainstream media, the traditional old guard media, has been fair in the way they've presented some of those topics you just talked about and the way they presented Romney as opposed to the way they've covered President Obama?
Well, I don't think they've been fair in the sense of how they cover both candidates. I still think there's a pretty big love affair with Barack Obama, which is inexplicable based on what he's been able to accomplish. But I go back to what I said in the beginning. The reason why the facts are so important is that even a liberal media can't escape truth as to where we're at in this economy. And so the nice thing, not a good thing for our country, but the nice thing about our case here is that the facts are on our side, and there is nothing better than walking into that closing argument with the facts on your side, even though we understand they're not facts that are good for this country, and we wish they weren't the case, but it is where we're at. And at some point, the media is going to, and they have acknowledged that this economy is indefensible, and the president has a lot to answer for.
Is there a particular example you can think of, something that really sticks out to you, a particular reporter or media outlet that you think has been more unfair to Governor Romney than the others?
Well, I don't. You know what? I'm not going to go there, but I'll tell you that when you hear some of these folks, a couple of them talked about the fact that they thought that the Democrat convention was flawless. I just, we started out with lies about the ambassador of Israel. Then we booed God and Jerusalem through a debacle on Tuesday to start the convention out, and then you had sort of just a almost Fantasyland type rendition of where we're at in this economy last night, with the president basically delivering a cross between a State of the Union speech and something we've heard about 100 times. You know, but in the end, what happened? It all came down to this morning as the sober reminder of where we're at as a country and what this president's been able to accomplish, and it's been a miserable failure.
Let's talk a little bit more about the campaign in general, the presidential campaign, as well as some of these Senate races. First, on to the presidential race. GOP nominee Mitt Romney is now eligible to spend general election money. How will he spend that cash, and how will the RNC spend its money in its coffers to help out Governor Romney's costs?
The vast majority of our money goes to the Army on the ground. I'm a believer in crushing your opponents on the ground, door to door, neighborhood by neighborhood, absentee ballot program, and the Democrats have nothing on us when it comes to the ground operation. They love spinning it, just like they love spinning that everything is great in America today and there's nothing to see behind the curtain. They love talking about their ground game. Their ground game doesn't stack up to us at all, and you saw it in Wisconsin. The Democrats bragged about the fact that they made 850,000 personal contacts in Wisconsin during the Walker recall. We made 4.5 million personal contacts. And I'm not talking about recorded phone messages. I'm talking about knocks on doors and volunteer phone calls to voters in Wisconsin. Sometimes voters called 2 and 3 times over. I believe the only way to win this election is on the ground. So our money, the vast majority of the Republican National Committee money that we're stockpiling, is all to the ground game, all making sure that we hit our goals and exceed our goals in communities and neighborhoods across America, whether it be in Toledo or Hialeah or Kissimmee, Florida, or Kenosha, Wisconsin. We have to hit our goals, and that's what we care about. We have the technology to do it. We have personnel up and down to get this done, and that's what my focus is on. The airwaves are going to be saturated. It all will come down to the door-to-door and ground game.
Now, there are, of course, also several key Senate races the GOP must win to take back control of the Senate. How confident are you that Republicans can pick up some Senate seats? And identify for us, if you can, you think what seats you think are the 3 best examples of seats that the Republicans can pick up in November?
Well, one I know we're going to pick up is Tommy Thompson in Wisconsin. That one, in my own mind, when you ask a question like that, that's the first person that pops in my head. It's an open seat. Tammy Baldwin is uber liberal, doesn't square really even with the Democrats. She barely squares with the Democrats in Madison, let alone the state of Wisconsin. And so Tommy Thompson's going to be great. Rick Berg up in North Dakota, Rehberg in Montana. Obviously, I think that we're going to Debbie Fisher is going to be fine in Nebraska. And then, you move over to the Midwest a little bit more, and you look at Mandel in Ohio. But if you were to ask me my top 3, I'd say North Dakota, Wisconsin, and Montana. And then from there, you've got to make sure that you do well in those battleground states like Florida and Virginia and Ohio. Basically, if you win those states, you win all 3 of those races. The other race I'd keep in mind, now you open up a Pandora's box and start talking Senate races, but I look at Hawaii. Someone that we're not talking about enough, but she's doing very well, is Linda Lingle out there. And I know we kind of write off Hawaii sometimes because you figure, well, Obama's got Hawaii. But remember, Linda Lingle is the one Republican out there that is more electable than any Republican and Democrat in Hawaii. And she's doing very, very well out there. So just keep that in mind as well.
That would be a big surprise, I think, for a lot of people. Last question for you. What in your mind, I know we're going to talk about jobs and the economy, but what do you think is going to be the pivotal issue, maybe the pivotal metric, the key piece of information that when voters go to the poll that they should keep in their mind before they pull that lever?
Well, this is a good question, and you'd think it would just be a quick answer. Here's the thing. I do think that it comes down to jobs, and I think it comes down to how people feel about whether or not this president fulfilled the mission of his presidency. what I think ultimately it comes down to is this, though. It's even broader than that. I don't think people believe that the president's real anymore, that the brand of Barack Obama is gone of '08. And when people start to believe that, okay, good speech, but you know what, pal, you really aren't connecting the dots. You're not who you said you were. I'm kind of tired of it all. That is a feeling. It's not something in particular, but it's a feeling that I think is the worst possible scenario for President Obama. And I think that's where the American people are at. And I think it's how most people feel about him. And I think that's a big problem for him. I think that's ultimately what will undo him.
Perhaps a parallel to the 1980 presidential election. Chairman of the Republican National Committee, Reince Priebus, it's been great talking with you today, sir.
Thank you.